In the war and how ethical we are as a people. We do have to remember that we don't really have to remember, unfortunately we know it more than ever, that we're standing right in the middle of this war. We've got hostages still stuck there, unfortunately. There's the soldiers still stuck in the middle of all of it. And we're going to start with a mizmor of Tehillim from the rabbi, followed by a chaylo from the chazanim, and then we're going to continue with the talk. Rabbi Eisenberg.
Yeah, unfortunately I don't have Siddur for everybody here. We do have them in the room, but we're going to have to try this without the Siddur. We're going to do Tehillim Kuf Kaf Aleph 1-1. Many of you will know it by heart. I'll try to say it slowly. You can either say it together with me, or if you know it on your own, or if you have it on your smartphone, read along. Shir lama alois, esa enai elel, ne'ai yavoi etzli, etzli l'madonoi yoisei shomai yoretz, al hidei namoit adlecha, al yonu shonelecha, hinei lo yonu v'lo yishon shonei Yisrael, Adonai shonelecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yadim yinecha, Yom HaShemesh lo yakeka, Yoreach Kalola, Adonai yishmo kol mikolo, yishmo yefes nafshecha, Adonai yishmo tzeisacho v'yecha, Yachlo v'yadollah.
What do you know?
Aleinu, Oreis Yisrael, Oreis Yisrael, and the serving Nazarah, Ashira, Oivli Veinayom,
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, some of you may already know of our organization. We are an organization of Jewish business ethics. So we learn all about the laws in business, how we conduct honestly, with integrity, what you're supposed to do in different situations whilst conducting your business deals in a good way. So, 2 questions for this evening. What is the aim of this evening? We have here an Israeli soldier, which is a very important thing. But what is the aim of tonight's talk? We've heard from lots of Israeli soldiers, unfortunately, throughout the year, what's going on there on the ground. What is the aim? And number 2 is, what's it got to do with Jewish business ethics, financial laws? So I'd just like to say one quick thought which will answer both questions. History, unfortunately, repeats itself, and I'd like to say a story that happened in going back in the Chumash. So Yaakov served faithfully Laban, who was the biggest trickster that we have had in history, most probably, for 20 years. He changes his salary, he changes his wife, he changes his wives, more importantly. Under the chuppah, he puts a different one. He had a fantastic business plan how to finance the wedding. So what he did was he invited loads of guests this evening, and I hope you've got your coats behind you, because what he did was he took all the guest coats from the cloakroom and he sold them. So he was the biggest trickster we've ever had in history. He almost bit him when he came to greet him because he didn't have a present ready for him. And at the end of all of it, Yaakov, with his sons and his wives and whatever goods he had managed to accumulate, ran away. In the midst of the night, he got up and he fled. Some of you may have heard this from me. Laban, finding out 3 days later that his prize has escaped, ran after him with an army. Because he didn't have a present ready. And he runs after him with this army. He checks for all of Yaakov's belongings. He embarrasses him. He does all sorts of things. And at the end of all of this, Yaakov turns around to Laban and he tells him. And he goes a little bit on a, so to speak, a rant. Then Jacob became angered and took up his grievances with Laban. And he says to him, what is my sin that you've hotly pursued me? What is my transgression? When you rummaged through all my things, what did you find of all your household objects? Set here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen. They had the ancient Uel, of course, and they had them all sitting there. And he said, let's make a fair court case. Let's see what's going on over here. And this is similar to what we're asking the nations of the world. Bring peace to Gaza. We've got our hostages, unfortunately, stuck there. We've had our people murdered. And all we want is bring peace to the Middle East. Bring our hostages home, and this horrible war will end. And what do they answer us? They answer us with nothing. They ignore the question of the hostages. They ignore everything. They just turn around to us and say, just bring peace. Just bring peace. So history does, unfortunately, repeat itself, and this is what we have here tonight. So the question is, what can we do about it? And more importantly, what was Yaakov really thinking? He knew more than me what Laban had done to him for 20 years. He tricked him, he was a crook through and through. What did he really want? So what I think tonight, I've said different answers in the past, what I think what is more than ever is the answer is that he had to drive home the point to himself. He had to reinforce the truth to himself. Laban has been talking to him and telling him, you're an unethical person, you're a thief, you're a crooked individual. And Yaakov knew that to be an untruth. But Yaakov, when he hears that day in, day out, and he comes here with his whole army, he checks for his belongings, he comes in, where's all my things? So Yaakov had to reinforce to himself that I'm ethical, I'm correct. And therefore he started this dialogue. With Laban asked him, what have you found? What is my sin? What is my transgression? So tonight we're going to talk about the ethics of the state of Israel. We're not going to go into any one particular decision. I don't know if any of you have read about the Chief Rabbi Sir Mervis's piece on Zionism. Any of you read it?
Yes. No.
So those of you who read it, he goes through lots of different things. And one of the things he points out at the end is that although we're promoting with the state of Israel and the ethics, we're not going to go into any one particular decision. He's not going into all the nitty-gritty. We're promoting on the whole the ethics. Our army is an ethical army. And we're going to bring that out by a couple of live descriptions tonight, a little bit of discussion. We are a people of ethics. When Remus and Romulus, the late Chief Rabbi, speaks about, were still roaming with the she-wolves in Rome, we Jews already had the Torah, Judaism, that set us out morals and ethics, how to behave. And tonight we're going to talk about, on one side we've got Rabbi Rappaport who's going to talk from our center about the Jewish business ethics, the ethics, how the halakha views different scenarios, and that is what the state of Israel is built on. And at the end of it, we're going to go into, Gabriel is going to go into how the laws, the current laws of the state of the world are incorporated into the state of Israel. And we're going to show ourselves, reinforce for ourselves, more than anything else, that we are an ethical people, we are a correct people. And it's all about embracing our heritage and looking it up, not listening to the media, which I like to call, I don't know if any of you will agree with me, but I like to call it not news, but lies. So we're going to reinforce to ourselves that we are an ethical people, and it's all found in our heritage. We'll learn a little bit about it, we'll hear the legal side, and for the starters, I'd like to welcome Gabriel, who worked in the European Bank, which is like a mini United Nations bank. We'll tell you more about it a little bit. And from his high-power job, he felt it was his duty to our people to go back and join his unit, which he did at the beginning of the war. He'll tell you a little bit about the experiences, which will follow the talk on ethics. Please, we all welcome Gabriel.
Hello everybody.
Hi.
Thank you very much for coming to listening to my story in such a cold night. Tonight I'm going to share with you a little bit about my experiences, also in Gaza, a little bit how I got here, why I'm in London, and just a little bit of my background. And I will start from the very beginning. As you can hear from my accent, I don't have a very typical Israeli accent. It's more of a South African accent. So I was born in South Africa. And at a very young age, my parents decided that we're going to Aliyah. We're going to come to the state of Israel, and we lived a comfortable life in South Africa. And at the age of 4, found myself in the kibbutz. Now, as you probably can imagine, the mentality of kibbutz and the mentality of South Africa is somewhat very different. And I needed to adjust. And I needed to fit myself to the Israeli society. For a very young age, I wanted to be part of it, and the best way to be part of the Israeli society is to become a fighter, a warrior. I was a very small child, I suffered from dyslexia, but I wanted to be a part of this unit. So I started exercising. From the age of 16, I went exercising maybe 4 or 5 times a week with special units, trying to get myself into the best shape, so that when the army will call me one day, I will be able to be ready. It's the year 2009. I was invited for some selections to come to the paratroopers, 2-day training, and I was told that I got it. For me, this was a passage of right into the Israeli society. I finally felt that I was part of something. We started training, and we trained for a whole year. We learned how to run, we learned how to jump out of airplanes. I was chosen to be a medic, and you're asking, why did they choose you to be a medic? So my commander saw my sniping capabilities, my commander saw my navigation capabilities, and they were not terribly impressed. So they said to me, Gabriel, you're going to become a medic. And I said, guys, I don't want to be a medic. He said, quite frankly, we don't care. So off I went to medics course, and I trained there for 3 months, came back to my unit and became a medic. We're talking about the years between 2009 and 2012. We served in all of the borders of Israel. Now, if there's one thing that I want you to come out from tonight, it's about the importance of the morality of the Israeli army. Despite what you hear, despite what people will tell you, from personal hand, I can say that there is no more moral army than Israel. Me personally, the majority of the medical experience that I had was taking care of Palestinian civilians that were hurt in car accidents, Israeli citizens, Syrian refugees that came on the border. I worked with the doctor, the head of the brigade, and we worked together and gave medical treatment for people that came from Syria, from all over the borders. It was a very good medical service, and I was very proud to be part of the paratroopers, part of the medic unit, and stuff went well. But unfortunately, for the rest of the country, the horrors in Gaza started at the 7th of October. For me personally, it started way before, during the military service. It was November, cold night just like that, 2011. I was just about to leave my unit to go back to the weekend home. And there I saw my good friend Nadav. We were sitting on a cup of coffee. We were talking together. And Nadav told me that he got injured in his service, and his service didn't go as he planned. And we all looked up to Nadav. Nadav was top of the notch, best sportsman, the most friendly guy in the unit. And I asked him, how didn't you become an officer? He said, I got wounded, but I still want to become an officer. And I said to him, that's a good approach. He said, I always gave the best. We were speaking on this cup of coffee, and then I needed to go, and my bus was going to arrive. I said to Nadav, take care of yourself. I said, take care of yourself, brother. So this is Nadav. And that night was the last night I saw him. At a cold night in Gaza, 7th of November 2011, terrorists came to the base. Similar to the 7th of October, there was a bunch of terrorists. Nadav and his unit came all the way to stop them. They were able to stop the terrorists. Unfortunately, Nadav got hit by friendly fire. He was killed immediately. My medic crew managed to save the life of another person. I was at home at the time. And just a month before that, Nadav and his mother were on the border, and they spoke. And he told his mother, you don't understand what's going on here. Gaza is a different planet. I knew that night that sooner or later, we're going to go back into Gaza. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Every day they tried to bomb us, every day there were incidents. I saw how serious they were. I finished my military service. I finished with honors. And I wanted to become a lawyer, to influence as much as I could. I managed to get a scholarship because of my achievements through the diaspora Jewish community. And thanks to the scholarship, I was able to go around the world and tell Nadav's story, tell my story. I even met with 3 famous paratroopers from the amazing photo of Jerusalem in Washington. This photo was taken. And I was able to get ahead in life thanks to my military career, thanks to my scholarship. I worked in the Ministry of Finance, everything to do with trade with Africa, the Middle East, and India. We were very important in implementing the first free trade agreement between Israel and the Emirates. And then, because of that, I was quite successful. I was sent here to London to work in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I was sent here by the Israeli government. And my job was to make sure that all the infrastructure projects were taken care of. Of course, under the monitoring of my supervisors. And also connect Israeli businesses to the bank itself. I managed to organize a delegation in the field of water to Israel. I brought people from the London Bank to Israel to study about water. And stuff was going really well. But in my back of the mind, I always knew, someday we need to go back. I was even fortunate enough to have a job to meet the king. He came to the bank. And I must say, the first year was amazing. Unfortunately, the 7th of October happened. The night before, I was sitting with my friend Owen, an Israeli French guy, who also came to the bank with me. And we were talking. He was saying to me about the division in Israel, the fighting in Israel, and all of the bitterness that's going on. And he said to me, Gabriel, are you worried about the people, or are you worried about what's going to happen? I said to him, no, I'm not worried. He said to me, why aren't you worried? I said, Baruch Hashem, we've got enough enemies. They will unite us. And unite us they did. The next day, like all of you, I saw the horrors of what's going on. I saw the massacre, I heard the news, I couldn't believe it. Because of my connection with the delegation, I knew some very top generals, I started speaking to them, and they said to me, we need everybody. Don't wait for people calling you, come, go on a plane, whatever you can, just to survive. I informed my superiors in the bank that I'm going to be leaving. and the struggle to get a flight ticket to Israel began. If you wanted to deal with Israeli bureaucracy during normal times, try to deal with war, impossible. But luckily, after a day and a half, I managed to get a plane ticket to Israel. Which of course was overbooked, and I needed to argue to go on the plane. The next thing, I arrived in Israel. I just left Israel about a week and a half ago. I was on vacation, but the country that I left and the country that I came back to was a completely different country. There was chaos in there. Everybody was in uniform. I remember my father driving me back from the airport. The sun seemed full of blood. There was such tension that I, in my lifetime, could never remember. I came home for the night, I took my equipment, and off to the army I went. Now, I'm very much into art, I paint, I do photography, and I managed to take my camera with me. So tonight, I want to share with you a little bit of the experiences of how a soldier feels coming from a bank in London wearing a suit the next day in the army in Gaza. It's quite a big contrast. I'm used to going to a country once every month. Here you're surrounded by 30 people. You need to remember how to be a soldier. I finished my military service in 2012. I've done reserve forces, but it's been a while. And then you start to work with your unit. You start to know the unit. Some people you know, some people are new. And you need to learn how to fight. Again, you need to remind yourself stuff. But as a medic crew, we were preparing for the worst. We did not know what was waiting for us in Gaza. We did not know who's waiting for us in Gaza, and we did not know how many injured people are going to be in Gaza. So we started working, and we prepared tents. We prepared tents, we prepared equipment, we prepared blood, and for about a couple of weeks we just trained together. I'm going to share with you now my feeling that I had the night just before we went in. It was a Friday night. We were doing the prayers. We were singing, and there was a feeling of a mission, but not a normal mission, a holy mission. We felt the presence of God. We felt it. We were sent to do something, to bring back the pride. And then we got the order. We put in our equipment. We went on the cars, and we prepared to go in. It was a powerful thing. A couple of weeks before, we saw the terrorists with the guns, with the ammunition, going in to kill our people. Now we were the people who were going in. Justice will be served. We walked in, and it took us a day to basically understand where we were. It took us a day to understand what's the environment in front of us. But something miraculous happened to me personally. All this fear that we had, and I must say, we needed to overcome, me personally, I needed to come over a lot of fear. Sort of vanished. You work like a robot, you prepare for stuff. You understand that you're in control, they are hiding. They're the cowards. We started rolling the area, controlling stuff. Artillery running all day above us. And we're in control. We're in control, not they are in control. Now after a year where we saw all of these events, these miraculous events, we know that we're in control. But back then nobody knew anything. There was a chaos. One big chaos. We played together. We prayed together. And there was a feeling of unity. But not only a unity with us as soldiers, a unity amongst all Israel. Religious people, non-religious people, people from the diaspora, people that were not Jewish, our allies, people contacted me from all over the world. What do you need? How can we help you? People send me shoes from America. People that I haven't heard for 10 years spoke to me. We were one unit, we were together like we're supposed to work. This is us, the night we're going in, the night where we became in control again. And this is Gaza already. The beginning of Gaza, now we're deep in Gaza, now we're controlling Gaza. This is Beit Hanun. One of the first houses is the beginning of Gaza. Suddenly, we went into the houses. We saw all of the propaganda that UNRWA prepared for us. Pages of a children's book calling to murder Jews. There was one very hard event which I'm going to share with you. As a medic, you're trained to help and save lives. We were expecting to get a couple of soldiers to give them medical support. Put on a uniform, put on a glove, the paramedic was there, a couple of people who were trying to understand what the situation was. And the soldiers arrived. Fortunately, they were not alive anymore. There was nothing we could do. Nothing we could do. But we were there. In my civilian force, I was with paratroopers. Here I was with the tank. Believe me, it's better to be with the tank in these situations. We worked together, us as the infantry with the tanks. I got to meet people from the first moment they became my brothers. And all day and night there was artillery running backwards and forwards. The Druze, our brothers fought with us together. We were not by ourselves. Young boys, men, 18, 19, serving there together with us. Everybody as one unit. These are the boots that were sent to me from America. All the way from America, top boots for the way. And of course, coffee, there was a lot of laughter. We like to think of war as something that's very dramatic and a lot of dramatic stuff. The majority of the time we sit and wait. We sit and wait for something to happen, and in the meantime we need to both. So we laughed together, made some jokes together, and kept each other safe as much as we could. Friends, the IDF is a powerful military. They have the capability to put destruction. But one thing I can tell you, the IDF has done everything in its power to minimize the civilian casualties. And where we could help, and where we could prevent, and where we could provide medical support or medical aid to the Palestinian people, despite the fact that they wanted to murder us, we've done what we could. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the Palestinian people. But it's not a tragedy that we created. We wanted peace. We've done everything we could for peace. And unfortunately, this war was not something we chose. But if you're going to kill our children, if you're going to rape our women, if you're going to make sure that the Jewish people are not safe, let the world know there will be consequences to this action. We pray together a lot for religious people, not religious people. There was right-wing, left-wing, people from Tel Aviv, people from the kibbutz, people from all over. We worked as one unit. Now, I served for a very short amount of time. All in all, maybe 2 months till I was sent back to London. I played a very small role. There were fighters and soldiers who were still there, been serving 200 days, friends who are not with us anymore. And we need to constantly remember what they have given for us, for all of us, to be safe. I spoke here in Manchester, I think it was March last year. And I said these words: don't underestimate our strength and our power. The gates of Auschwitz closed, and after several years, the state of Israel was born. Just when we think we're in our weakest point, this is where we find the greatest strength. This is where we come together and nobody can handle us. We managed to deter all of our enemies. We managed to unite us. Hopefully peace through strength will come to Israel soon. Trade agreements will be served. Projects will be created. I'm Israel Khani. Thank you for listening. Any questions, feel free.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Gabriel, for your heart-rending talk is probably the more correct word. I don't think it's a beautiful talk. We've heard it live. We're now going to go on to the next part of tonight's evening, which is to bring out that unlike the media that are bashing us, we are ethical people. We have not only do we have what to stand on, the world has to stand on us to look at morals and ethics. So we're going to start with a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get through everything, but please God, we'll find for another opportunity. So the very first question we're going to be talking about is that in the early days of the war, there were many incidents of both terrorists and soldiers sheltering in the houses in the kibbutzim surrounding Gaza. This resulted in much damage to the property, so that both from our side and from the not good side, they had to fight. There was firing going on, both to the soldiers that were sheltering in these houses, and the property was damaged. So we're going to go through what would the Israeli law perspective, what is the halakhic perspective in the following cases. So Jewish soldiers sheltering in the property that gets damaged from enemy fire, what happens? First of all, are they allowed to, do they have to, who has to pay for this damage? What goes on? Rabbi Rappaport.
So, first of all, thank you everyone for coming tonight. It's very nice to see everyone. Thank you, Gabriel, for coming all the way from London. If I may just interrupt and thank Rabbi Shabsky for organizing this amazing evening. Just like we have in our heritage, we have limitless amounts of heritage. Rabbi Shabsky has limitless amounts of koach and strength. And he's always looking for the next horizon that needs to be reached, and long way to go on. So, actually, as we hear, we're a nation. Us Jews have known war for a very long time, and we only have to look into our history and our heritage in the Torah to see sources for what we want to know. And in fact, we can look back at one of the well-known kings of Israel, David HaMelech, and we can see where there was a story that happened with David HaMelech, where the questions that were just raised were dealt with him, and he had to deal with them. And the story was that David HaMelech was fighting the Philistines. The Philistines were camped in Beis Lechem, south of Yerushalayim. They were camped, and David HaMelech had a fortress. There was a fortress, and he was in a fortress, and they were waging a battle against each other. The pasuk, it actually appears twice. It appears once in Samuel and Shmuel, and once in Chronicles and Divrei Hayomim. And the pasuk says that David HaMelech asked, "Who can give me to drink from the waters of the well of Beis Lechem, which is by the gate?" It seemed like David HaMelech was thirsty. David HaMelech had 3 mighty warriors, 3 heroes. They broke through. It seems like they broke through the blockade. They went to retrieve the water, and they gave it to him. And it says that David HaMelech nevertheless did not drink the water. It seems a bit of an interesting story. Was he really that thirsty? Did he really need the water specifically from that well, which was in Beis Lechem? What was he asking for? So our sages explain, and this appears in Talmud, in the Gemara and Baba Kama, that really David HaMelech had an halachic question. And he was asking, the halachic question, he was asking for water. Water is an analogy for Torah. It revives a person, it refreshes a person, it sustains a person. So David HaMelech had a question, and he sent it to those who sit at the gate, the Sanhedrin, the highest Torah authority in the land. What the question was, is a couple of options. And one of the options mentioned in the Gemara, one of the suggestions in the Gemara is is that there was a pile of grain that belonged to a Jew. And there was a group of Plishti soldiers, of Philistine soldiers, who were hiding in the pile of the grain. They were endangering David HaMelech's life. And David HaMelech's question was, can I burn the whole pile of grain? Because by burning in the pile of grain, I will kill the soldiers. And I'll burn the pile of grain, I'll inflict damage on a Jew because I'm going to take away his pile of grain. And on the other hand, I'm saving myself. Now, an important point has to be made over here. The Torah demands from a person an extremely high level of vigilance and care regarding another person's property. If, as it was in the olden times, I owned a cow or a horse, which I'm sure all of you own, and you had your horse or cow was walking along the street and it damaged another person's property. If it damaged the person's property unwittingly, in the regular course of its way, the animal was walking and damaged someone else's property, you're exempt. I don't need to pay if my animal damaged without intent. However, the level of care that a person has to take care, if a person damages another person's property, even unwittingly, and even without intent, the Torah will hold you to account. Adam muad la'olam. A person, when he damages, is considered as if he's damaging with intent. A person is walking along a roof, and there's no fence, and a wind comes and blows the person off the roof, and thank God there's a car underneath him which saves his life, but the car gets damaged. He has to pay for the damaged car. The person is responsible for his actions. On the other hand, we know that it is incumbent upon a person to do his utmost to save someone's life. And all of the mitzvahs in the Torah, besides for the 3 cardinal sins, they're all pushed away in order to save someone's life. So now we can have a conflict, as it were. I want to save someone's life. David HaMelech wanted to save his soldiers. How? By killing the Plishti soldiers, by killing the Philistine soldiers. On the other hand, he was going to damage someone's grain. What should he do? So the Sanhedrin said, they sent back a message, Osir lahatzel asmi b'maman chaber. Person cannot save his own life with someone else's money. The Rishonim explained, it doesn't mean that one is not allowed to save one's life. You must save your life. You must save someone else's life. But you must also pay for the damage. So we have both mitzvahs that are both of these concepts which are very important to us. You must not damage another, and you must save someone's life. How do you do both of them together? You go and damage his property and you pay him back, and you save the person's life. So David HaMelech, go and burn that pile of grain. Go and save your soldiers, but make sure to reimburse. So if we're going to just follow that first question, the first question was?
So let's ask Gabriel for a live example. When I first put this question across to Gabriel, after the media bashing us and calling us all sorts of names that were unethical, we've heard the Jewish heritage, how Jewish heritage looks at it, that on one hand, we must do the utmost to save our own lives, and on the other hand, we must do the utmost to save everybody's life. On the same time, we must ensure that we don't damage someone else's property. We're going to go into a little bit more detail than that. So how does modern-day Israeli society deal with such things?
So Israeli law regarding war we're talking about, yes?
Yeah.
So during war יש חוק דיני מלחמה, פיצויים for מלחמה. In other words, the government is obligated to compensate the people. If there is a damage created by our act of war, and we're in officially a state of war, what the Israeli government does is to put in a form, claim the different damages that were created, and by law you're obligated to be compensated for the damage that was created. Now, just a general background about Israeli law. Israeli law is derived from several elements. So the one element is British Mandate law, because the British were here. Another element is a little bit of Ottoman law, some continental law from the Germans, and of course Jewish law. And in several situations, you will go to different sources. Now, you have to understand something about Jewish law. It existed about 2,000 years without a country. So a lot of the laws that were created inside the community were not so relevant for the state of Israel. So the Rabbi Goren, when he created these laws, he went and study the Bible laws. So the story about David HaMelech would be very relevant to understand the situation, and it had probably a lot of impact of how we look at the situation today.
Before I carry on and answer my rapport, to go a little bit more into detail, who here holds we're an ethical people? Let's have a show of hands. Right, I think we made the point, we're going to carry on. We're going to answer our rapport to look a little bit more into our heritage and go a little bit more into detail.
Thank you. So the first iteration we can have of this question is, what would happen if you are sheltering in a property that gets damaged by Israeli fire, by enemy fire, my apologies. So, I mean, this was obviously a very frequent occurrence in the first days of the war, where in the kibbutzim there was ongoing pitched battles between the terrorists and the soldiers. So you would have the soldiers were sheltering in a house on a kibbutz, and the terrorists were firing RPGs and bullets and who knows what, and damaging the property. So, I mean, Israeli law would be that you just apply for compensation, I suppose.
Regarding the damage for the property or life?
The property.
Of course, yeah. So you apply for compensation, but just one thing to emphasize, the compensation that is given is not only for damage that the Israeli army done. Even if the enemy then damage for Israeli property, Israel is obligated to pay. It's a big difference to any of contemporaries and our neighbors. Okay.
So that's actually quite interesting, because in halacha it would not be the case, because, as we say, a person is responsible for his actions. And in this case, although I was sheltering in an enemy property, at the end of the day, the one who inflicted the damage was the enemy. So they'll have to pay for it. Hopefully the enemy who are damaging the property will pay for it with their lives, but the responsibility at the end of the day ultimately rests upon the enemy who is damaging. The concept that we mentioned before about saving yourself by using someone else's money wouldn't necessarily apply in such a case. Because even though I'm going into a property which does not belong to me to shelter and save my life, I'm passively saving myself, as it were, with someone else's property. I'm not actively. In the case of David HaMelech went and lit the pile of grain on fire. He actively damaged it. Whereas in our case, I was sheltering in a property and I perhaps caused the property to damage, or I was the reason for the property to get damaged by the enemy. Such a level of obligation doesn't necessarily exist in halacha, and you would be exempt from such a case.
So I would like to add that whilst Rabbi Rappaport is bringing out the strict halacha, that we also have something called beyond the letter of the law, going the extra step. We are an ethical nation, and we look in our heritage, we find it all there. And as Gabriel has just mentioned, we go even beyond the letter of the law. So the law will only obligate us to compensate for our actions. The state of Israel goes even further than that and compensates even if it's not per se their actions. So we're just bringing out here a little bit for ourselves to strengthen ourselves, that we are a moral people, we are an honest and faithful people.
The next iteration we can have of the question is that being a Jewish house that the soldiers were sheltering in, you can be sure that it was very well stocked with food. Now, the question that can arise is, if these soldiers were sheltering in the house, and in the first days of the war there was quite a lot of chaos, and the soldiers got hungry, would they be allowed to eat the food in the property? Just Gabriel, can we hear about the...
So this would be the question, not so much regarding Israeli legal law, but more army law, basically fighting. You're allowed to eat the food, but you have to compensate for it, and you can only eat the food just for the minimum you need. You cannot take all the best wines or all the best this, you just take the minimum you provide. But nevertheless, let's say if you are staying in an enemy's house, the army must first do everything in its capability to provide you food. You should not touch anything in any equipment, not food, not property, nothing. If you get to a life situation where for some reason the reserves and the supply chain was cut and you're stuck without food, only then you're allowed to eat it and you need to compensate. And Gaza is basically taking war stuff any soldier that is caught doing it, and there were one or two, is kicked immediately out of the military. All the stuff that is compensated, even if you find a lot of money that normally is supposed to go for terrorism, the army compensates it and nobody uses it. It's not money that is allowed to be used. So not only was Jewish property, also was the enemy.
Sorry, who exactly is being compensated?
Confiscated. It's
That's
confiscated.
the stuff you find is in the terrorist.
So if it's Israeli citizens, it's quite simple. With Arab citizens, I would not know to tell you exactly how the mechanism works. It's too much of a complicated situation, so I cannot really elaborate on subjects that I don't completely understand.
Thank you.
So in halacha, the halacha would be quite similar, meaning that if you're in a Jewish house, you can't, if you don't, there's no need for the food, then you can't take the food, just like you can't steal from someone. There are certain cases, it's a very specific scenario where, let's say, if someone has something for sale, you can take it and later on replace it with maybe later on replace it or immediately replace it with something else. In fact, in the scenario of David HaMelech, one of the other iterations in the Gemara suggests that the question of David HaMelech was that there was a pile of grain which was owned by a Jew, and the animals, the war horses of David HaMelech needed to eat. And the question was, could he take the barley which belonged to this Jewish barley, and he had a pile of beans elsewhere, and he wanted to do a switch. I'll take the barley for my horses, and I'll give you the beans. And the question was he allowed to do that? And the answer came back that he was not allowed to do that. And there's various discussions among the Rishonim. It gets quite technical about when you can do it. In very limited circumstances, perhaps you can if you have money ready, but that's only if you don't need it. If you do need it to survive, then again, that goes back to the question of whether we're allowed to save yourself with another's money. And you would be allowed to take the food, but obviously you'd have to pay back for it. It should be noted, and I'm sure Gabriel can agree with this, is that a soldier has to be at his best. So you don't have to be on the verge of starvation to say that you need to save your life. If a soldier's senses are dulled, then he'll need the food to be at his best, so he'll be allowed to take it.
What happens when an Israeli soldier damages the property of a non-combatant Palestinian person?
We've got to get there. I'd just like to add on what Gabriel mentioned before about taking food from a non-Israeli house. My grandfather was a soldier in the War of Independence, and my mother was, she should be healthy and well, my mother was a little baby at the time, and there was rationing in Israel. There was not a lot of food in the house. And my grandfather was fighting in Katamon, if you all know Yerushalayim, Mikovshei Katamon he was. And they conquered the house, and he found in the house there was a big bag of rice. And that rice kept the family going. So they literally saved their lives with some rice that they found while they were fighting for their lives. We'll go to can I discuss your question in a minute? So you asked about damaging a property. You were asking about what happens if you damage a property of a enemy civilian, as it were. Let's extend the question a bit. In the kibbutzim, during the battles as well, this happened to the Israeli houses as well. You had terrorists sheltering in houses, and you had to blow up the house to kill the terrorists. So the same question arises. You've got similar question. You've got the question about when you're damaging an Israeli house, and you've got the damaging when you're damaging an Arab house. Is there a difference whether I'm in a tank blowing up the house, or is there a difference where I'm piloting a drone from Tel Aviv? There's a drone flying around over the kibbutzim, and I'll drop a bomb from the drone. So we have in halacha, we have the concept of a roidef. So a pursuer. So you've got a roidef, you've got a pursuer. Reuven is chasing Shimon, and Reuven wants to kill Shimon. Anyone in this room is obligated to kill Reuven, save Shimon's life. Now, what happens if Reuven, while Reuven's running to kill Shimon, he knocks over someone's jar, he damages a car, he damages anything? Is he obliged to pay if he, for whatever reason, doesn't die? Does he have to pay back?
Yeah.
He does not, because Reuven is under death sentence. We're allowed to kill him. And there's a concept that we punish a person with always the severest punishment. So he's got here a death sentence, and he's got an obligation to pay. So we say he only gets the death sentence. The obligation to pay is nullified. What about Shimon? Shimon's running away for his life. He's fleeing for his life. And while he's fleeing for his wife, he sees a ming vase, and he picks it up and he flings it at the person behind him to chase him to try and save his life, and he damages the ming vase. Does he have to pay? The answer is yes, because you cannot save yourself with someone else's money. Meaning you're allowed to save yourself, but you'll have to pay. Now what happens if I see Reuven chasing Shimon, and I pick up the ming vase and I fling it at Reuven? Do I have to pay? Yes. I should have to pay, right? Very good, because I can't save someone with someone else's money. But if I pick up the vase and I start looking at it and I say, whoops, it's Ming, I'm not going to use this one, let me look for one from Asda. What's going to happen to Shimon in the meantime? He's going to be a goner. So Chazal said that even though by the letter of the law you should be obliged to pay when I cause damage when saving someone else's life, nevertheless, since it could result in a hesitation, and a hesitation of even a second in trying to save someone's life can, God forbid, result in that person losing his life, Chazal said, they instituted a takana, you're not obliged to pay. So if we go back to our question, if there's a terrorist sheltering in someone's house, and technically I'm trying to save my life, I'm in a tank, I'm trying to save my life, he's firing RPGs at me, and I blow up the house, so it could very well be that I'm obliged to pay. If I'm piloting the drone from Tel Aviv, then I would not be, because I'm not in danger. I'm saving someone else's life, and here, the institution of Chazal to save someone else's life, that I'd be exempt from paying would kick in. Regarding the non-Jewish properties, the Palestinian properties, the same concept would apply. You cannot necessarily damage a non-Jewish property, but in as much as a terrorist is in the non-Jewish property, it could be different whether it's rules of war, it could be different, could be exempt as well. Totally exempt, especially when you're trying to save the lives of the people they're firing from. The terrorist who's hiding in the house, he would be obliged to pay, because we don't have the concept of applying the heaviest punishment to necessarily the terrorist who's in the house. But then again, I don't know who's going to go claim the money from the terrorists. Maybe we'll get it from the money that they confiscated from the terrorists.
Regarding the Israeli law, to the best of my knowledge, if a person in a country are considered enemy country, Israel will not feel obliged or need to compensate in any way or form any damage that was created. Specifically in areas like the 7th of October, where there are hostages held in these properties, where hostages are held and were convicted by civilians, the Israeli law does not refer to any form of compensation whatsoever. Again, I may be wrong about it, but this is to the best of my knowledge. Regarding Israeli property and the terrorist attacks, that falls into a different category, which we spoke about before, and there Israel will need to oblige and compensate if a house was ruined, if farmland was ruined for Israeli civilians. And again, when I say Israeli civilians, it could be anybody that's holding Israeli citizen card. So it could be Arabs, it could be Druze, it could be Bedouin, it could be Jewish, anybody that holds an Israeli Teudat Zehut, and his property was damaged by the IDF, should be compensated.
Right, so we're going to go to the next question. Time's running short, we're just going to do a couple of questions. So the next question is, a group of Jewish soldiers found themselves behind enemy lines under heavy fire. So they wanted to do what probably would be the most practical would be under this situation to save themselves. They wanted to take civilian hostages, human shields to save themselves and make sure that they'd be on the winning side. What does the Israeli law talk about? What does that halakha talk about? Taking human shields.
Okay, so these incidents that happened, that Israeli soldiers were under threat and they used civilians as human shields, and not to put them in danger, but to protect our forces. The Supreme Court was very clear about it and said that it's completely forbidden by Israeli law. You cannot do it. There were several strong rulings by Chief of Justice and Aaron Barak, and he made it clear that Israeli law does not prevent it. It's against Israeli law, and and against international law, which Israel does apply for. You're not allowed to do it in any type of circumstances, and there are no exemplaries. Even so, today, Israel goes to the extent that before they bomb an area very often, they will send letters and give information to the terrorists there that it will be bombed, and warns civilians to get out of there to prevent any human life. As I said, the IDF is not a perfect army. There are all mistakes that are made, but the IDF does everything in its capability to improve itself and to minimize human loss. And if stuff is not okay, the Supreme Court will always intervene, and sometimes intervene too much, in my opinion, but they will intervene and protect civilians as much as possible.
Hey Gabriel, before we go to the halakha, you need to tell me that the Israeli law will protect people even at a threat, and they will ensure that the morals and the ethics are upheld.
I would refer to you to a speech given by Benny Gantz, who said that in some situations he would prefer to put civil lives and soldiers in more risk if it will minimize civilian lives.
So do you understand why the media have all sorts of names about us?
Look,
It's ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
So
we've just gone through how the ethics and morals appear.
I will share with you something as a medic. Before you arrest any terrorist, even today after the 7th of October, you do a medical examination of a terrorist. And if there's anything wrong with this terrorist from any point of view, and I'm even talking about bad teeth, you will provide them medical assistance. And you would send them for surgery. I'm not sure if you're all aware of the story. Yehia Sinwar, the mastermind behind the 7th of October, was in Israeli jail. He had a tumor in his brain, and we saved his life. We saved his life, and the next thing he said, thank you, you've done what you need to do, and I will do to you what I need to do. Gabriel said, the bigger the lie, the more people are going to believe it. And when it comes to anti-Semitism, people are always willing to believe the lies. As a medic, as somebody that took care of Arab people, took care of Palestinians, of Syrian refugees who very likely were part of Daesh, I can say with complete certainty that the IDF says and that everything in its capability to prevent human lives of our enemies.
So, Rabbi Rappo, let's go to the halachic side, how our heritage looks at such things.
So, I just want to say that we're in a very good spot. We've got very good traditions to live up to. We just have to look at our history. We look at our history of where we come from, who we are, and we can see that we're living up to our morals. In Tanakh, there's a story in Tanakh about the Melech Achov, King Achov. King Achov was fighting a war against the Arameans, Arab, and the Ben Hadar, I think, was the king at the time. And there was an absolute rout. Yeah, they in one day they managed to kill over 100,000 Aramean soldiers, and the king was left basically by himself. He ran away. He fled for his life, and he came into his palace and he said to his servants, "What do we do now?" So he said, "Well, you know what we should do? We should go surrender, because we've heard that Malchi Yisrael is a Melech Rachamim. The kings of Israel are kings of mercy." That was our reputation thousands of years ago. That's what we have to live up to. The Rambam says that we lay siege to a city. You're not allowed to close off all four sides of the city. You have to leave a way open for people to flee. It's incumbent upon us, and it's demanded from us. It's inbuilt and it's ingrained in our DNA that we are kind, merciful people. So the IDF is living up to something which is a heritage which is there. You want to say something?
So, a lot of things are not talking about regarding the war. And one of them is the fact that there are supplies coming into the people of Gaza. Where are they coming in from? From Israel. What border is closed? It's the border of Egypt. To who these supplies are going? To the Palestinian people. but not only to the Palestinian people, to the people of Hamas. Israel is actively providing aid to its enemies during wartime. Imagine the British actively providing aid to the Germans during wartime. Imagine the Americans actively providing aid to the Vietnamese at the wartime. The world can criticize us as much as they want, but we are doing above and beyond that as a minimum civilian life will be hurt. And that's something to remember when talking about the IDF and Israel.
If we focus on the question that was raised about taking a human shield, so as Gabriel mentioned, the question was not necessarily that the civilian that was taken as a human shield was in danger. It was just done to protect the soldiers. So in halacha, in such a case, certainly when you not endangering the civilian, you're protecting yourself, and the civilian is not going to die, and you're not going to die, then that would be 100% permitted. You're saving your own life, and no one's being put in danger. In a case where, much as like our enemies are, they don't care about human shields, then it wouldn't help very much to take a human shield. The question can arise when the human shield will be put in danger, and you will be saving your life by putting him in danger. The more difficult question is, what are you meant to do in the case of the hostages? Let's say there's the terrorists are holding a Jewish hostage. The terrorists are actively endangering us. They're firing on us behind a Jewish hostage, one of our hostages. And you can kill the terrorist. Yeah? You can fire a bomb at him, you'll kill the terrorist, but unfortunately you'll kill that Israeli who was taken hostage. Are you allowed to do that? So I assume that, do you want to speak about the law first? Or?
So the Israeli law is not so relevant for the situation, as you need to examine every situation individually. Understand which people will be hurt and which people can be saved. These are very delicate matters that cannot be solved by any legal equation. Some situations you will kill the terrorist and the hostage. Other situations you will prevent it. Depends on the amount of other people that will be injured. It's case by case and decisions that are made in split seconds. And a lot of the criticism that is made is people that are sitting in air conditioners, people that are sitting far away, even by the Israeli society. And the generals on the ground and the soldiers on the ground need to make split second situations. Sometimes they're ready to make the right decision, sometimes not. But it's very hard to judge. And there's no clear answer to each situation regarding the Israeli law.
So I have to say the same. There's principles that are given to us in halacha, but they won't. It's difficult, as Gabriel was saying, it's difficult to apply them to each situation has to have a lot of thought and analysis to see how it applies to each individual situation. Let's speak about a couple of principles. So there's a Gemara in Pesachim. Talmud says that someone approached Rabba, talking about the Amorei, and he said to me, I live in a city, and the ruler of the city has told me I have to go and kill someone. Someone who obviously he wasn't happy with, obviously. So he told me I have to go kill him, and if I don't kill him, he'll kill me. So what should I do? We know that you're obligated to do the maximum to save your own life. So can I go kill him in order to save my own life? And the answer was that Rabba said, no, don't do anything. Because why do you think your blood is redder than his? I.e., each soul is valuable to Hashem. Each soul is precious to Hashem. And there's going to be a soul lost over here. Either he's going to kill you, or you're going to kill the other fellow who does. Either the ruler will kill you, or you're going to kill the other fellow who the ruler told you to kill. Don't do anything. Technically, in a hostage situation, that is the case. You have a terrorist firing at you, and if you fire back at the terrorist, you're going to kill the hostage. So, whose blood is redder? What about when there's many people in danger? What about when the terrorist is firing rockets at the city, and he's got a hostage? So, there's many people in danger, and you can kill the terrorist in one hostage, you take many people. These are difficult questions. Just mention that there's a Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish, famously, he came from Vilna in Lithuania, and he moved to Israel. He passed away in the 50s. And the Chazon Ish discusses a very interesting case. And to put it in modern terms, imagine you have a tram, and the tram is running along the track, and its brakes fail, and it's going to plow into a crowd of people. And you need to save the crowd of people. So there's a changing point in the tracks, and you can flick the switch and divert the tram away from the crowd of people. It will go down a different track. On a different track, there's one person there, standing there. And that person will get killed. The dilemma, what do you do? Do you let the tram run its course, plow into a crowd of people, and many people will die? Or do you try and save the crowd of people by diverting the tram along the track where only one person will go down? The Chazon Ish says that what you're doing when you're changing the points is you're not trying to kill the single person on the track. You're trying to save a crowd of people. When you're involved in an act of saving, an act of hatzalah, so we view the consequence of the single person being killed as an unwanted consequence. That's not the main point of your action. You're trying to save people, you're not trying to kill people. It's difficult to apply the Chazon Ish to this case. There's more to talk about perhaps. It's difficult to apply it, but it should be mentioned that there are rules of engagement. Rules of engagement famously are rules of war. In halacha there's also rules of war. The halachas and rules of war are more flexible is the wrong term, but you have to engage in battle. And battle by necessity and war by necessity will involve casualties, both of soldiers and the non-combatants of civilians. And a king has permission to go to war. A king can declare war. There's a whole section of Rambam called Hilchas Milchames, Melachim or Milchames, the halachas of kings and wars. And a king is allowed to declare war, even though the war will by necessity involve casualties. In last week's parsha we said that it was said to Noach, Hashem said to Noach, Umiyad ish ochiv edroishes nefesh ha'olam. From each man, his brother, I take account for the dam of a person, for the soul of a person. So says the Netziv on that pasuk, when we live in times of brotherhood, and a person kills another, he'll be taken to task. But when you're in a time of milchama, and by necessity, in the times of war, there will be unwanted casualties, both of soldiers and civilians. That is the way of war. So as long as you're acting, you're not wantonly hurting civilians. As long as you're not wantonly bombing civilians, you're trying to involve in war, and you're trying to win the battle, win the war, then if there aren't, you can't say it's permitted, because it's never permitted to kill someone. But if someone is killed by an unfortunate consequence, you will not be able to task. So if you're in the middle of a battle and you're trying to kill the terrorists and a hostage unfortunately gets killed, you would not be able to task because in fact you are involved in a very great mitzvah of saving Klal Yisrael.
So we've just brought out not only what we all know, that we are an ethical people. I don't think we needed this event not to strengthen this either, but how technical our ethics go and our morals go, to what extent we go as a people, and our tradition and our heritage. We're now going to open the floor to question and answers.
I'm Oluwani. I am from the African Israel Partnership. Thanks so much for this meeting, because for me, I see this as like an education for me, because I'm not a Jew, but I've learned a lot. Now, but something is very loud in the room here, because I've learned a lot. Like, you can pick a hostage before you arrest that person. You do a medical check, and you know, that stuff is great. I've learned all that, and I'm educated. And you ask a question and say, are we ethical? Everybody said yes. But one thing that is loud in this room is, who else knows that you're ethical? It's a point. Who else knows that? I just came back from Geneva yesterday from the UN, and I just want a quick statement. There was a meeting, everybody came together to talk about Israel and Palestine war. You know, the ambassador of Palestine in New York was there, and they talked from A to Z in the room. But there was a loud president, there was a loud absence. there was no single Jew there.
So we're going to answer that question at the end, and I think you brought out what my end message is going to be. I'm going to finish off with that message. It's also going to answer why us as an organization have chosen this. I mean, besides the obligation and duty to us, what we're going to do about it.
So, can I just give one remark about what Albert said? The importance of this evening tonight is for all of us to have a voice. Me as somebody that sits in international forums sometimes, but now each one of you has friends, has colleagues. Speak up. You're not going to speak up, nobody's going to know. Speak up, don't be afraid.
There are those who say, you're sending in aid, you're feeding the enemy, so you're prolonging the war. You're robbing us of them having an incentive to rise up against Hamas and say, give them back their hostages. Let's finish with this. We're hungry. So what's the halacha on that? Why are we not doing that? And what's the halacha?
I don't know about the halacha, but I just can say also Americans, not the Israelis.
I didn't understand what you said.
Also the Americans, not just the Israelis.
Yeah, regarding why are we doing it, also Americans.
Ask the Americans. Ask the Americans. The distinction. This is a whole. I'm not going to speak for the next 45 minutes. I could if I wanted to. But the distinction between combatants, non-combatants, non-innocent civilians, yes, innocent civilians. But it is just. I'll just say the one thing that is related to who our heritage is. We don't wantonly kill civilians. We don't wantonly starve civilians. Laying siege. There's halachas of siege as well, like we mentioned before. You have to leave them a place to flee. You have to leave them a place to retain food. As Gabriel said, you have to ask the Americans, because whatever we're sending in is not enough, and whatever we're doing is not enough, and the Hamas terrorists are stealing it more. But at the end of the day, we don't want to starve children. That's not who we are.
Halacha is any concept of a conscientious object.
Conscientious objector, okay. Now, we're really going to have to look at a conscientious objector. Okay, so as far as I understand, I'm no lawyer. A conscientious objector is someone who is opposed to the ideas of the war and the goals of the war, or the battle being fought, and therefore he refuses to take part in the battle. Either he disagrees with the whole premise of the battle, he disagrees with the whole premise of the army, he disagrees with the whole premise of the country. In halacha, it doesn't necessarily so much apply today with the state, but in times when we had a king, the rights of a king, the rights that were given to a king were that he could raise an army. A king was anointed by a prophet. He was anointed and the prophet was told by Hashem to anoint a king. One of the rights granted to the king was that he could raise an army. He was allowed to raise an army, and he's allowed to impose his will on the nation that they have to raise an army. So there's no such thing as conscientious objector, because if you refuse to listen to the king, then you have the status of a traitor. And I'm sure as a good British citizen, you know what happens to someone who's a traitor. Yes. So in halacha, there's not necessarily such a concept as a conscientious objector. Regarding the Israeli law,
Israel law is a little boralina, and they do say Dina ben Malchut Adana. Today the Malchut is considered the country, the Medina. And if you refuse to fight, you simply sit in jail for a certain amount of time. But I would say it's very technical, nobody actually does. And anybody that doesn't really want to serve in the army will not serve in the army. And basically nothing really will happen. There are no real consequences today in modern Israel. So anybody that's there is there because they want to.
They won't get a good job.
What?
They won't get a good job.
No, they will get a good job. They will, everything. Today, it won't affect it. In the beginning of the state, it affected quite a lot. Today, very mild effects. Maybe after 7th of October, it's different. But all in all, you basically, if you don't want to serve, you're not going to serve.
Anyone else has any questions?
Yeah. You said before about the Israeli law is obviously based on halacha and British mandate and international law. Why Ottomans? The Ottomans left and the British came in. So why do you keep it?
So I think you've got a very good legal mind, and I'm pretty sure sooner or later you're going to become a lawyer, maybe with a judge. So the law of the land was adopted by Israel. So when the British left, there was a gap in law. In the moment that the law was gap, you needed to fill it in. So automatically, a lot of the laws from the British Empire were incorporated in Israel. But in the British Empire, had some Ottoman laws, specifically regarding the holding of the land. In Israel, there's something called the Tammuz. That was where the land is written. And so we got some of the Turkish Ottoman law because of the gap in law. And if the Israeli Parliament will create other laws, so the law will become redundant. But until they don't do it, you've got off of it. So it's a very interesting mix of different laws.
We're just now going to give closing remarks, and then we're gonna have refreshments.
Can we just address one question that came in? You may have already addressed it slightly, but one question that we had online is what halacha says around targeted killings, because part of what we're doing is not only protecting ourselves, but we are actually actively going after people that we know are commanders of the enemy forces. So what does halacha say on that point?
So, among my many talents, I do not list military strategists. So,
not yet.
The truth is like this: is that in as much as there's a military objective to doing a targeted killing, then according to halacha, it's permitted. No question about it. It's part of the battle. That's why the reason why I prefaced it by a military strategist is because you can go on for hours and hours and hear the debate in the house. I've got no idea, nothing to do with me. But in as much as it works, if it does work, then it's permitted.
So just for the closing remarks on my side, I really appreciate all of you coming. I must say for Evan Lewis for basically introducing us all here. We are currently with our friends, Charles and Argo, we are trying to build up in our country to bring Israeli infrastructure to invest in Africa. And me personally, I finished my relationship with the bank. I'm open for suggestions if anybody's got anything. Thank you very much. And may next year when we speak, Israel will be in a stronger position.
Amen. Thank you again, everyone. Just as closing remarks, we were privileged to spend last year Sukkot in Israel when the war broke out. And we actually had we came back as a family, we came back to Manchester via Abu Dhabi actually. And on the plane from Israel to Abu Dhabi, there was a youngster there who was a survivor from the Nova. And within 2-3 minutes of us meeting him, he said, I was in the Nova. About 2 sentences later, he said that, he said he made a minyan and he said Agoma, so the blessing of Thanksgiving. And he said he took upon himself that he's going to be careful about washing his hands in Tilat Hamayim every morning and putting on tefillin. I think that brings up the beauty of who we are, is that we strive for greatness, we strive for excellence. And this youngster, his first thought was, what can I do to show my gratitude for my salvation? What was the gratitude? He wanted to improve himself, he wanted to grow. I think by us gathering together to hear these words of inspiration, these words of Torah, we're also trying to grow. And with this merit, we should be there to see the war over in peace.
So just one small story that gave me a little bit of hope in this time. My sister done a lot of Israel advocacy during the war. And there was one night about 6 months ago, she was very sad. She lived in Tel Aviv. And she said she's got to go out. She's just got to go out, see the people, just get out of her head a little bit. And she was amazed. She went out relatively late in Tel Aviv. The whole city was alive in the middle of the war. And then she knew that we're going to be okay. Because we are a nation that strives for life. It doesn't matter how hard the situation is, we are always looking for life, completely in the contrary to enemies. So because of that thirst to life, we can get through these hard times, and we're going to get through them together.
Thank you. I'm not going to hold you any longer. Please God, we'll have more of these sessions, and please God, the war will finish before we.
I was going to speak out of it. The point I was going to say is
One person doesn't say, I don't know every year.